Coffee splashed across Eleanor Mercer's cardigan as Principal Roberts slammed his fists. On the conference table, a library without technology is useless. Just like librarians who can't adapt, he announced to the entire faculty, his eyes fixed on Eleanor. Maybe it's time for you to retire and let someone who understands the digital age take over. The room filled with uncomfortable silence as the 53-year-old librarian quietly dabbed at the brown stain spreading across her beige sweater. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, her eyes hardened into something that made Roberts flinch involuntarily. Before her expression returned to its usual placid calm, Westridge Academy sprawled across the Connecticut countryside like an architectural afterthought. Red brick buildings connected by tree-lined pathways where students huddled over their phones. Between classes, among the 100-plus faculty members, Eleanor Mercer moved like a ghost. Her silver-streaked dark hair always secured in a simple bun. Horn-rimmed glasses perched on a nose that had been broken and reset with military precision. Students called her the Whisper because she never raised her voice, never needed to. Her silence commanded more respect than Roberts' theatrical outbursts ever could. Her domain was the third-floor library, a cathedral of books largely abandoned in the digital age except for the occasional student seeking shelter from the cafeteria's social battlefield. While other faculty decorated their spaces with family photos or inspirational quotes, Eleanor's desk remained conspicuously bare save for a polished rosewood box, the size of a small dictionary. Its brass lock remained perpetually fastened, fueling endless speculation among the students brave enough to venture into her quiet realm. Every morning at 5:15, before the campus stirred from slumber, Eleanor would circle the academy's perimeter on foot, completing exactly 3 miles regardless of weather. Security guard Jeff Colton had initially tried engaging her in conversation during these pre-dawn rituals, but after weeks of receiving only the briefest, most efficient responses, he'd given up. Now he just nodded as her slim figure passed the gatehouse, her pace military precise. Her breathing never labored despite the punishing Connecticut hills. Mercer's at it again, Vice Principal Audrey Wilson remarked one morning, watching from her office window as Eleanor methodically shelved books. Does she ever smile, talk, do anything besides alphabetize and intimidate teenagers? Wilson's new assistant, fresh from graduate school and eager to impress, giggled obligingly. God, she's like a robot. 26 years at Westridge and nobody knows a thing about her. The faculty lounge buzzed with usual lunchtime chaos when Eleanor entered, conversations shifting to pointed whispers. She moved through the room like a ship parting water, claiming her usual corner table far from others. She ate methodically, her movements economical and precise, ignoring the not-so-subtle glances from younger teachers who wondered how someone so outdated had survived budget cuts and strategic restructuring. Heard Roberts is cutting the library budget again, English teacher Brandon Chen said, loud enough to carry. Says physical books are obsolete. Probably thinks the same about their keepers. The laughter that followed had become routine, background noise that Eleanor seemed not to hear as she finished her lunch in solitude. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Eleanor preferred the silence. It had become her armor. Over 15 years of civilian life, and she wore it like the flight suits that once defined her existence. The whispers that followed her through hallways were nothing compared to the roar of afterburners that still visited her dreams. The radio chatter that had once guided her through hostile airspace now replaced by the gentle rustle of turning pages. As she stood to leave, Roberts appeared at her table, blocking her path like a schoolyard bully. At 42, he embodied everything the board wanted in a modern educator: young, tech-savvy, and photogenic enough for recruitment brochures. Eleanor, he said with manufactured concern, the curriculum committee has some concerns about the library's relevance in our 5-year plan. Perhaps we should discuss your future plans. His smile never reached his eyes, sharp as broken glass. Eleanor met Robert's gaze with unsettling steadiness. I'm precisely where I need to be, Principal Roberts. Something in her tone made him take an involuntary step backward before he caught himself, embarrassment quickly morphing into determination. "We'll see about that," he muttered, retreating with his entourage of administrative sycophants trailing behind like remoras. Attached to a predator, back in her small apartment that evening, Eleanor sat on her austere bed, the mattress military firm. Beneath her, the rosewood box from her desk now rested on her lap, its brass key turning with a satisfying click. Inside, beneath a carefully folded silk scarf, lay a worn leather flight log stamped with the emblem of the United States Air Force. She'd carried that log through 3 combat tours, recording missions that Pentagon officials still discussed in hushed tones. Tonight, she found herself tracing the embossed letters of her former rank: Lieutenant Colonel Eleanor Phoenix Mercer, F-16 Combat Squadron Commander. Beneath the log sat a faded photograph of 6 pilots standing before an American flag, desert sand coating their flight suits, arms slung around each other's shoulders with the easy camaraderie of those who'd faced death together. Eleanor's finger traced each face, Ramirez with his perpetual smirk, Chen whose calculations never failed, Williams who could tell jokes during the most harrowing missions, Torres whose instincts saved them in Baghdad, and Daniels, James. Daniels, her wingman, who hadn't come home from their last mission. 15 years had passed since she'd piloted anything more complex than her 10-year-old Volvo. But in her dreams, she still felt the gravitational forces pressing against her body during high-G maneuvers, the exhilarating rush of breaking the sound barrier, and the focused calm that descended when targeting systems locked onto hostile aircraft. Most of all, she remembered the crushing responsibility of command, decisions made in microseconds that determined who lived and who died. The Phoenix Squadron patch lay at the bottom of the box, its threads still vibrant despite the years, their unofficial motto embroidered beneath the image: "First in, last out, none forgotten." She hadn't worn it since the medal ceremony where generals pinned commendations to her chest, while carefully avoiding mentions of the classified mission that had ended her flying career and taken her closest friend. Eleanor closed the box, locking away her past with practiced efficiency. Tomorrow would bring new humiliations, new efforts by Roberts to drive her into retirement. But she'd faced worse than an ambitious principal with authority issues. Much worse. The library assessment began at precisely 9 a.m. the next day. Roberts arrived with 2 consultants from an educational technology firm, their expressions making it clear this was less evaluation and more execution. Ms. Mercer, the taller consultant, began, not bothering to introduce himself. In today's digital learning environment, how do you justify the square footage dedicated to physical books when studies show 87% of student research happens online? Before Eleanor could respond, Roberts interjected. Ms. Mercer still believes in the Dewey Decimal System and card catalogs. The consultants exchanged knowing smiles as Roberts continued. Perhaps we should consider converting this space into a multimedia center, something more current. Eleanor stood motionless, her silence filling the room more effectively than any protest. The shorter consultant, visibly uncomfortable with her steady gaze, fumbled with his tablet. "Well, we'll need to inventory everything, assess usage patterns, conduct student surveys. Just give us your recommendations for downsizing staff and materials." Roberts interrupted. "The board wants options by next week." He emphasized options, while staring directly at Eleanor, the threat unmistakable. Students working nearby watched the confrontation with uncomfortable fascination. Zoe Martinez, a senior known more for basketball than academics, frowned as she observed the principal's thinly veiled hostility. Eleanor had helped her navigate scholarship applications when no one else had bothered, patiently explaining processes her immigrant parents couldn't decipher. Now Zoe watched as the older woman absorbed Robert's disrespect with the same quiet dignity she'd always shown. Later that afternoon, the library emptied except for Eleanor methodically reshelving returns. The sound of breaking glass shattered the silence, a rock thrown through the window, sending crystalline shards across reference books. Attached to the projectile was a crude note, "Retired dinosaur." The handwriting matched Robert's administrative assistant's distinctive style, though Eleanor knew complaints would lead nowhere. Instead of reporting the incident, she simply swept up the glass and taped cardboard over the broken window. The vandalism was merely another skirmish in Roberts' campaign to claim her territory. For his modernization crusade, Eleanor had survived surface-to-air missiles and enemy fighters. A petty administrator's psychological warfare hardly registered as a threat. The faculty meeting erupted into chaos when Roberts announced his library evolution initiative, a thinly veiled plan to dismantle Eleanor's domain and replace it with a digital learning hub, staffed by part-time tech assistants instead of a full-time librarian. Eleanor sat perfectly still while colleagues avoided eye contact, their silence confirming what she already knew. No one would stand against Roberts and risk becoming his next target. "The future is digital," Roberts proclaimed, pacing dramatically before his PowerPoint presentation. "Studies show that libraries without technological integration are becoming obsolete. We must evolve or perish." His gaze lingered on Eleanor. With each emphasized point, his message unmistakable. As faculty filed out after the meeting, English teacher Chen caught up with Eleanor in the hallway. "This is wrong," he whispered, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "He's been planning this since he arrived. The board chairman's son owns that tech consulting company." Eleanor nodded once, acknowledging the information without comment. Chen hesitated, then added, "Some of us could speak up, maybe write a letter of support." "Don't," Eleanor interrupted, her voice soft but firm. "This isn't your battle." She'd learned in combat that you never risked your squadron on unwinnable missions. Chen had a young family, a mortgage, 3 years until tenure. She wouldn't allow him to sacrifice his career for her. The systematic dismantling of the library began the following Monday. Maintenance workers arrived to measure spaces and mark bookshelves for removal. The tech consultants installed sensors to track space utilization, their cameras conspicuously focused on Eleanor's desk. A memo announced reduced library hours to facilitate transition planning, effectively cutting Eleanor's classroom support time in half. Most insidious were the random inspections, Roberts appearing unannounced to document supposed deficiencies. "Dust on these shelves, Ms. Mercer," he would announce loudly enough for students to hear. "These reference materials are over 5 years old, practically ancient history." Each criticism was meticulously noted in her personnel file. Building a case for performance-based separation, students noticed the campaign. Zoe Martinez and her friends began spending more time in the library, a silent show of support that Eleanor acknowledged with the barest nod of appreciation. But even their presence couldn't stop what was coming. Roberts had the board's backing and 15 years of budget reports showing declining library usage. The technology integration workshop was the final humiliation, mandatory training for all faculty on the new digital systems that would replace traditional research methods. Eleanor sat in the back row while Roberts' hand-picked trainer, a former textbook salesman with no library science background, explained why books were obsolete. "Let's have a volunteer demonstrate the old versus new approach," the trainer announced, eyes scanning the room before settling on Eleanor. "Ms. Mercer, perfect. Show us how you'd help a student research climate change using your current resources. Then we'll demonstrate the digital method." The setup was obvious. Force the outdated librarian to fumble through books while the sleek new system delivered instant results. Roberts couldn't hide his smirk as Eleanor slowly approached the front of the room. "Climate change. Research," Eleanor repeated, her voice carrying surprising authority that quieted the room. She turned to the demonstration computer, current approach. Her fingers flew across the keyboard with unexpected precision, navigating database pathways that the trainer hadn't covered. Within seconds, she'd accessed peer-reviewed journal archives, cross-referenced scientific studies, and compiled a research pathway that highlighted credible sources versus misinformation. The trainer blinked in confusion. That's actually the digital method we were going to show. Information literacy isn't about medium. It's about methodology," Eleanor stated calmly. "I've been teaching digital research since you were using dial-up internet." The room fell silent as she returned to her seat, leaving the trainer stammering through his remaining slides. Later that afternoon, Roberts cornered Eleanor in the empty library, his face flushed with anger. "Quite the performance today, trying to embarrass my staff," simply demonstrating competence, Eleanor replied. Something apparently unexpected. Roberts stepped closer, invading her personal space. This changes nothing. The library conversion happens next month, and you'll be offered early retirement or reassignment to textbook inventory. In the basement, your choice. For a moment, something dangerous flickered in Eleanor's eyes. The same calculating assessment that had once locked onto enemy aircraft. Roberts felt it like a physical threat and stepped back involuntarily. There's always a choice, Eleanor said quietly, turning back to her cataloging as if he'd already left. That night, as she walked to her car, Eleanor noticed security personnel photographing her vehicle. Roberts was building his case methodically, documenting her every move for whatever endgame he had planned. The emergency alarm shattered the Tuesday morning quiet, its piercing wail sending students scrambling from classrooms. Eleanor calmly directed library occupants toward the nearest exit, while checking between stacks for stragglers. She was following the rear of the evacuation line when Vice Principal Wilson rushed in. Breathless and panicked, "Eleanor, thank God. You're still here," Wilson gasped, her usual composure fractured. "It's not a drill. There's a situation in the East Wing. A group of men with weapons. They've barricaded the senior chemistry lab with students inside. Police are en route." But she broke off, hands trembling as she clutched her phone. Eleanor's posture shifted imperceptibly, her voice taking on a crisp, authoritative tone that Wilson had never heard before. "How many intruders? What weapons? Where exactly are law enforcement staging?" The rapid-fire questions came with such natural command that Wilson found herself answering automatically. 3 men, at least 2 handguns, possibly a rifle. They're demanding access to the school's financial records and the principal's office. Something about evidence of fraud they claim Roberts is hiding. Police are 8 minutes out. Staging at the north parking lot. Eleanor moved to her desk and unlocked the bottom drawer with a key, kept around her neck. Instead of cowering or joining the evacuation, she was methodically removing items from the drawer: a small tactical flashlight, a multi-tool, and what appeared to be a communications earpiece that she slipped into place with practiced ease. "Ms. Mercer, what are you doing? We need to evacuate immediately." Wilson's voice rose with panic as Eleanor calmly studied the school's floor plan, posted by the emergency exit. "Get to the evacuation point and make sure Roberts doesn't try anything heroic," Eleanor replied, her focus on the map. "Tell first responders there's a former Air Force tactical officer inside who can provide situational intelligence." She moved toward the eastern emergency stairwell with purposeful strides, leaving Wilson staring in stunned confusion. "Air Force what, Eleanor? You're a librarian." Eleanor paused at the doorway, her expression hardening into something Wilson had never seen before. The face of a combat veteran assessing tactical options. "Today, I'm both. Now go." The East Wing corridor stretched empty before her as Eleanor moved with the silent efficiency of someone trained to navigate hostile territory. The sounds of panicked voices echoed from the chemistry lab, frightened students, and harsh commands from the intruders. Eleanor positioned herself at the junction of 2 hallways, using the reflective surface of her tactical flashlight to assess the situation around the corner. 3 men, dressed in black tactical gear that suggested security backgrounds, but lacked the discipline of proper military training. Their weapons were commercial-grade semi-automatics, serious but not military spec. Eleanor noted their positions, movement patterns, and the makeshift barricade they'd created using lab tables inside the classroom. 27 students and their teacher, huddled against the far wall. Eleanor recognized Zoe Martinez among them, the girl's face showing fear, but also a steely determination as she comforted a sobbing classmate. The intruders had isolated Roberts, who appeared to be the focus of their attention. One man held a laptop, demanding access to financial records, while another pressed a gun against the principal's temple. "Last chance, Roberts. The records showing where the construction money really went. Open the encrypted files now, or we start with your kneecaps and work our way up." Eleanor assessed the tactical situation with the same calculated precision she'd once used over hostile airspace. the intruders were focused on Roberts. Their attention split between their hostage and the doors. Their tactical awareness was amateur. At best, weapons discipline poor, no proper lookout established. Communication between them haphazard. Most importantly, they hadn't secured the ceiling access panel in the hallway outside the lab. A critical oversight. Moving silently to the maintenance closet adjacent to the chemistry lab, Eleanor located the access ladder to the ceiling crawl space. Years of pre-dawn runs and maintained physical discipline were about to prove their worth. As she pulled herself into the narrow space above the dropped ceiling, the building's blueprints she'd memorized during her first month at Westridge, a habit from military days when knowing exit routes could mean survival, now guided her as she navigated toward the lab. Through gaps in the ceiling tiles, Eleanor could now observe the entire hostage situation. The leader, a broad-shouldered man with a barbed wire tattoo visible above his collar, grew increasingly agitated as Roberts fumbled with passwords on the school's financial system. "I don't have that level of access," Roberts protested, voice cracking with fear. "Those records are on the district servers." The crack of a handgun against Roberts' cheek silenced his excuses. "Wrong answer. Maybe watching what happens too. One of these kids will improve your memory." The leader gestured toward the students, and his accomplice grabbed Zoe by the arm, dragging her forward despite her resistance. Eleanor had seen enough. The police response would take too long, and the situation was escalating toward violence. Through her earpiece, she could hear law enforcement establishing their perimeter outside. Still minutes away from a proper breach, the hostage situation had reached its critical point. The moment when a mission commander had to commit to action or accept casualties. Her decision made, Eleanor removed a ceiling tile directly over the rear of the classroom and prepared to become the one thing no one at Westridge Academy had ever expected. The Ghost of Phoenix Squadron returned to flight. The tactical earpiece crackled with police chatter as Eleanor calculated angles and distances. Her muscles tensed, muscle memory from thousands of hours of combat training taking over. Through the ceiling gap, she watched the leader press his gun harder against Roberts' head while the second intruder dragged Zoe toward the front of the classroom. The third man maintained his position by the door, weapons sweeping nervously across the hostages. "Final chance, Roberts," the leader snarled. "The files, or we start sending out bodies." Eleanor removed her cardigan and glasses, securing them. Quietly in the ceiling space, with deliberate movements, she untucked her blouse and rolled up her sleeves, revealing forearms corded with lean muscle and a small tattoo of wings on her right wrist. The transformation from unassuming librarian to combat-ready officer happened in seconds. A change in posture, breathing pattern, and the cold focus in her eyes. The ceiling access panel made no sound as Eleanor removed it completely. Using the structural beam for leverage, she positioned herself directly above the rear of the classroom, calculating trajectory and impact. Below, the third intruder's attention had shifted entirely to the confrontation between his leader and Roberts, his weapon discipline growing increasingly sloppy. Eleanor dropped silently from the ceiling, landing precisely behind the rear gunman. Before he registered the movement, she executed a textbook chokehold, controlling his weapon arm while cutting off blood flow to his brain with practiced pressure. The man slumped unconscious in 7 seconds, his weapon secured before it could clatter to the floor. None of the hostages or remaining intruders had noticed. Their attention focused on Zoe and Roberts at the front of the room, using the lab tables as cover. Eleanor moved in a crouch toward the second intruder, the one holding Zoe. The girl's eyes widened in shock as she spotted her librarian, not cowering or hiding, but advancing with predatory precision, signaling for silence with a subtle finger, gesture that Zoe instinctively obeyed. "I'm accessing the system now," Roberts stammered, buying seconds without realizing help was already in motion. "Please, don't hurt the students." The second intruder had positioned himself poorly, his back partially to the room as he focused on intimidating Zoe. Eleanor closed the distance in 3 silent strides, striking with clinical efficiency at the pressure points where neck meets shoulder. The man's nervous system short-circuited from the precision strike, his body crumpling before his brain could process the attack. Eleanor caught him as he fell, easing his unconscious form to the floor while simultaneously relieving him of his weapon. Now only the leader remained, the most dangerous target. With his weapon still pressed against Robert's temple, Eleanor met Zoe's eyes and motioned for her to slowly move back toward the other students. The girl showed remarkable composure, retreating without drawing attention while Eleanor assessed her final approach. The leader remained unaware of his vanished backup, focused entirely on intimidating Roberts into compliance. Eleanor needed a distraction, something to separate the gun from Robert's head for just a fraction of a second. She found it in the form of the chemistry teacher's demonstration laser pointer, still sitting on the desk from the morning's lesson. With a precise throw, Eleanor sent the pointer clattering across the front lab table. The leader instinctively turned toward the noise, his weapon moving a critical few inches from Robert's head. In that momentary window, Eleanor launched forward in a blur of movement that defied her 53 years, her first strike targeted the leader's weapon arm at the exact point where nerve clusters controlled grip strength. The gun clattered to the floor as his hand involuntarily opened. Before he could recover, Eleanor delivered a precision combination that military hand-to-hand combat instructors would have used as a textbook demonstration, an elbow strike to the solar plexus followed by a sweeping leg move that took the much larger man off his feet. The leader hit the ground with Eleanor already controlling his descent, using his own momentum to flip him onto his stomach while securing his arms in a joint lock that hovered just at the threshold of breaking bone. The entire takedown occurred in under 4 seconds, so fast that most students were still processing what they'd witnessed. "Ma'am?" Zoe's voice broke the stunned silence. "What? How did you?" Eleanor maintained the restraint hold while addressing the room with the clear, commanding voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed in crisis situations. "Mr. Chen, there's flex cuffs in my right pocket. Please secure this individual while I check the perimeter." The English teacher stumbled forward in shock, accepting the restraints with trembling hands. Roberts stared open-mouthed as Eleanor methodically secured the scene, checking the 2 unconscious assailants before moving to the door with one of the captured weapons. Held with unmistakable proficiency, she established communication with law enforcement through her earpiece, delivering a tactical assessment that made the SWAT commander on the other end pause in surprise. "This is Eleanor Mercer, Westridge Academy librarian and former Lieutenant Colonel, Air Force Special Operations. Hostage situation neutralized. 3 perpetrators subdued. All hostages secure. Be advised, I'm currently holding position at the east entrance to the chemistry lab with 28 civilians. Approaching officers should know I'm armed with the perpetrator's weapon for scene security only, and will surrender it immediately. Upon your arrival, the SWAT team's entry 8 minutes later found an orderly classroom, with students seated calmly along the far wall, 3 restrained attackers under watch, and Eleanor Mercer standing at parade rest by the door, weapon pointed, safely at the ground. The team leader did a double take at the slender woman in sensible shoes and a pencil skirt, who had just neutralized 3 armed men without assistance. "Ma'am," he began uncertainly. "You're the librarian?" "Currently, yes," Eleanor replied, professionally, handing over the weapon before turning to ensure her students remained calm. During the evacuation procedure, the transformation was remarkable, the same quiet efficiency she'd always shown, but now contextualized by unmistakable military bearing. As authorities secured the scene, Zoe approached Eleanor, her voice hushed with awe. "It was you the whole time, wasn't it? All those perfect book recommendations about female pilots throughout history. You were trying to tell us." Eleanor adjusted her glasses, which Chen had retrieved from the ceiling along with her cardigan. "Books have many purposes, Zoe. Sometimes they're mirrors that reflect what we already are. Sometimes they're windows into what we might become," the tactical commander interrupted, his expression mixing confusion and respect. "Ms. Mercer, we'll need a full statement. And Phoenix Squadron? That call sign you used with dispatch, wasn't that the classified unit? That's a conversation for a more appropriate setting." "Commander," Eleanor replied with the quiet authority that silenced further questions. As students were escorted out, she caught Roberts staring at her with a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and dawning comprehension. The petty administrator who had tried to bully an outdated librarian into retirement was finally seeing the woman he'd actually been facing all along. The Westridge Academy gymnasium hummed with nervous energy as students, faculty, and parents gathered for the emergency assembly called 2 days after the hostage situation. Local news vans lined the parking lot, reporters jockeying for the best camera angles to capture what had become the most sensational story in Connecticut education. The school librarian, who had single-handedly neutralized 3 armed attackers, using military combat skills no one knew she possessed. Eleanor sat quietly in the back row, unchanged in her appearance, the same modest attire, practical shoes, and unassuming presence that had made her virtually invisible for years. Yet, the difference was palpable. Students stared openly. Faculty members, who had never spared her a second glance, now watched with undisguised curiosity. And parents whispered behind programs, pointing discreetly at the woman everyone suddenly wanted to know. Superintendent Halsey approached the podium, the microphone feedback momentarily silencing the murmurs. "The events of Tuesday morning have deeply affected our community," he began, his practiced public speaking voice carrying across the gymnasium. What could have been a tragedy was averted through extraordinary actions that none of us could have anticipated. Roberts sat stiffly beside the superintendent, his face still bearing the bruise from his encounter with the attackers. His expression remained carefully neutral, though his hands gripped the edges of his chair with white-knuckled tension. Before addressing the security protocols being implemented, "There's something more important we must acknowledge," Halsey continued. "Sometimes heroes walk among us unrecognized. Sometimes we fail to see the extraordinary in those we've categorized as ordinary." The gymnasium doors opened, and a group of uniformed military officers entered, Air Force dress blues, moving with disciplined precision down the center aisle. Leading them was a 4-star general whose chest bore rows of decorations that commanded immediate respect. The assembly fell silent as they approached the stage. "It is my privilege to introduce General Michael Harrington, Deputy Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force," Halsey announced. Stepping aside as the general took the podium, Harrington surveyed the room with the measured assessment of someone accustomed to command. Before his gaze settled on Eleanor, "Would Lieutenant Colonel Eleanor Mercer please join me on stage?" The collective intake of breath was audible as Eleanor rose and walked forward. Her gait had subtly changed. No longer the retiring librarian, but a military officer responding to a superior's summons. She mounted the steps with fluid grace and came to attention before the general, executing a perfect salute that demonstrated decades of ingrained discipline. "At ease, Colonel," Harrington said, returning the salute with equal precision. He turned to address the stunned audience. "Most of you know Eleanor Mercer as your school librarian. What you don't know, what very few people have been cleared to know until now, is that before coming to Westridge Academy, Lieutenant Colonel Mercer was one of the most decorated combat pilots in Air Force history." The slideshow behind him displayed a younger Eleanor in flight gear, standing beside an F-16 Fighting Falcon, her call sign Phoenix emblazoned beneath the cockpit. Colonel Mercer flew 142 combat missions across 3 theaters of operation. She commanded Phoenix Squadron, an elite tactical unit whose operations remain largely classified. Murmurs rippled through the audience as more photographs appeared. Eleanor receiving medals, leading briefings, emerging from aircraft with the confident bearing of a combat veteran. The contrast with the quiet librarian they thought they knew was stunning. "What happened here Tuesday wasn't luck," Harrington continued. "You witnessed the actions of an officer whose tactical judgment and combat skills placed her among the most elite operators in American military history. Her transition to civilian life after her service was a personal choice, one the Air Force has always respected while maintaining awareness of her ongoing contributions to education." Roberts shifted uncomfortably in his chair as Harrington glanced his way with subtle disapproval before continuing. "The individuals who entered your school were not random attackers. They were part of a sophisticated corporate espionage operation targeting financial records related to the school's construction contracts. Contracts that our intelligence services have been monitoring in connection with defense, infrastructure security concerns. The revelation sent another shock wave through the assembly. Harrington turned to face Eleanor directly. Colonel Mercer was never just your librarian. While the specifics remain classified, I am authorized to acknowledge that her position here has been part of a longer-term security protocol involving several educational institutions with defense contract connections. Eleanor's expression remained professionally neutral, though a small muscle in her jaw tightened, the only indication that this public revelation wasn't entirely welcome. In recognition of her actions this week, and with the President's authorization, I am here to present Colonel Mercer with the Airman's Medal for Heroism, involving voluntary risk of life. Harrington opened a small case containing a gleaming medal on a light blue ribbon. This decoration acknowledges heroism not involving actual combat, displayed by Colonel Mercer in protecting 27 students and 1 faculty member at severe personal risk. The gymnasium erupted in applause as Harrington pinned the medal to Eleanor's blouse, an incongruous sight against her civilian clothes, but perfectly aligned with military precision. She stood at attention, accepting the honor with the composed dignity that had always characterized her presence at Westridge, even when that presence had been deliberately overlooked. When the applause finally subsided, Harrington stepped back from the microphone, giving Eleanor the opportunity to speak. The audience leaned forward collectively, eager to hear from the woman who had hidden in plain sight for so many years. Eleanor approached the microphone, her voice carrying the same quiet authority she'd always used in the library, yet somehow different, layered now with unmistakable command presence. Thank you, General Harrington. To the Westridge community, I've always been exactly who I appeared to be, someone who believes in the power of knowledge, in creating safe spaces for learning, and in protecting those under my care. Her gaze swept across the assembly, briefly meeting Zoe's eyes, then Shen's, before settling momentarily on Robert's. The skills I used Tuesday were developed in one career, but have always informed another. A good librarian, like a good combat officer, observes patterns, processes information rapidly, and makes decisions based on both available data and intuitive understanding of human behavior. She touched the medal briefly. This honor belongs as much to the students who maintained their composure during the crisis as it does to me, particularly Ms. Martinez, whose courage under pressure would make any squadron commander proud. Zoe straightened in her seat, eyes wide with surprise at the public acknowledgement. As for my past, Eleanor concluded, it has never been separate from my present. It has simply been a chapter in a longer story, one found in the biography section. Dewey Decimal Classification 921. With that subtle librarian's reference, she stepped back from the podium, the ghost of a smile briefly appearing before her professional composure returned. The media storm descended on Westridge Academy with hurricane force. News vans clogged the entrance. Reporters ambushed faculty members in the parking lot, and helicopter footage of the campus played on national networks. The fighter pilot librarian became an overnight sensation, America's newest unlikely hero, complete with hastily produced documentaries featuring dramatized reenactments of Eleanor's military career based more on speculation than fact. Through it all, Eleanor maintained her routine with military discipline, arriving at 5:15 for her morning run, opening the library precisely at 7:30, and continuing her duties as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Students who had never set foot in the library now crowded the space, watching Eleanor reshelve books with the same methodical precision, hoping to glimpse some hint of the combat pilot beneath the cardigan. Faculty who had once ignored her now sought her company at lunch, peppering her with questions she deflected with practiced ease. Principal Roberts had virtually disappeared, reportedly taking administrative leave while the school board investigated the security. Contractors he had hired, the same contractors, linked to the hostage-takers. 1 week after the assembly, Eleanor sat in her apartment reviewing the formal letter that had appeared in her school mailbox. That morning, the Westridge Board of Trustees had unanimously voted to cancel the library evolution initiative and instead approved funding for A comprehensive expansion. The letter cited recent events highlighting the critical importance of information literacy and professional library services as the justification for this dramatic reversal. A separate document outlined her substantial salary increase, promotion to Director of Information Services, and special commendation for extraordinary service to the Westridge community. The political maneuvering was transparent, the board scrambling to align themselves with their suddenly famous librarian, while distancing from Robert's now tainted modernization plans. Eleanor placed the letters in her rosewood box alongside her flight logs and squadron patch. The validation meant little compared to the more significant changes already unfolding. That afternoon, she had found Zoe Martinez helping younger students with research techniques, confidently explaining primary source verification methods Eleanor had taught her. Chen had launched a veterans oral history project, creating digital archives of local military experiences. Most surprisingly, the basketball team had started spending their study periods in the library, their captain declaring it their strategic headquarters with complete seriousness. A knock at her apartment door interrupted her thoughts. Through the peephole, she recognized General Harrington, now in civilian clothes. Eleanor welcomed him into her sparse living space, noting his appraising glance at the minimalist furnishings that reflected her military background, functional, organized, lacking personal touches except for a single framed photograph of Phoenix Squadron on the wall. "You've caused quite a stir, Colonel," Harrington said, declining her offer of coffee. "Pentagon's been fielding calls from Hollywood producers wanting rights to your story." "Not my story to sell," Eleanor replied, her posture automatically straightening. In the presence of a superior officer despite her civilian status, Phoenix Squadron's operations remain classified. "That's actually why I'm here." Harrington handed her a sealed folder bearing security classification markings. "Department of Defense is declassifying portions of your service record, specifically the Kandahar extraction and the Tehran intercept. Public Affairs thinks your new visibility provides a strategic opportunity to highlight female combat leadership." Eleanor accepted the folder without opening it. "With respect, General, I left that life for a reason." "Because of Daniels," Harrington said quietly. "James was my godson, Eleanor. I never blamed you for what happened in Mosul. Neither did his parents." The mention of her wingman sent a familiar pang through Eleanor's chest. James Daniels had followed her order to engage a surface-to-air missile battery that intelligence had identified as a critical threat. The intelligence had been wrong. It was a trap designed to lure American aircraft into a prepared kill zone. Eleanor had managed to evade and return to base with critical damage to her aircraft. Daniels hadn't made it back. "He trusted my judgment," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the weight of memory. "As his commanding officer, the responsibility was mine." Harrington sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. "You completed 20 more missions after losing him, Eleanor. Earned the Distinguished Flying Cross for the Baghdad extraction. You didn't let his loss compromise your command effectiveness. And then I walked away," she finished, turned in my wings and disappeared into civilian life, into exile. Harrington corrected gently. "Hiding your talents, accepting disrespect from people who couldn't qualify to refuel your aircraft, much less command you." He gestured at her apartment. "This isn't living, Colonel, it's existing." Eleanor moved to the window, looking out at the Connecticut evening settling over the neighborhood. "What exactly are you proposing, Michael?" "The Air Force Academy needs a new director of strategic studies. The position includes faculty rank, security clearance renewal, and the opportunity to shape the next generation of officers." Harrington placed a second folder on her table. "Your combat experience combined with 15 years in education makes you uniquely qualified. No cockpit, but a return to the service community." The offer hung in the air between them, a bridge back to the world she'd left behind, a chance to reclaim part of her identity without returning to the precise role that had cost James his life. "There's something else you should know," Harrington continued when Eleanor remained silent. "The corporate espionage operation here at Westridge isn't isolated. We've identified similar patterns at educational institutions with defense connections across 3 states. Someone's been systematically targeting infrastructure projects, siphoning funds, and compromising security protocols. Eleanor turned from the window, her tactical mind already processing implications. You suspect a coordinated operation. We know it's coordinated. What we don't know is who's running it or how deep it goes. Harrington tapped the folder. The Academy position is real, but so is our need for someone with your particular skill set to help untangle this network. Someone who can operate in educational environments without raising suspicions. Understanding dawned as pieces clicked into place. My position here wasn't entirely coincidental, was it? Eleanor asked, though it wasn't really a question. When the previous librarian retired suddenly, we may have helped Westridge identify a uniquely qualified candidate, Harrington admitted, though we never anticipated Robert's vendetta or the direct security breach. Your background made you the perfect passive observer, someone who could monitor potentially compromised defense-adjacent educational institutions. While maintaining deep cover, Eleanor's lips twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. So I've been an unwitting intelligence asset while cataloging young adult fiction? Nothing unwitting about it. Your security clearance never lapsed, Colonel. It simply went dormant. Harrington stood, moving toward the door. The Academy position starts next semester. Take some time to consider it. Meanwhile, I suspect Westridge will be far more appreciative of their librarian's contributions going forward. After Harrington left, Eleanor opened her rosewood box once more, removing the squadron patch with its phoenix emblem. 15 years ago, she had locked away that part of herself, believing the price of command too high to bear after losing James. She had disappeared into the civilian world, finding a quiet purpose in guiding young minds while keeping her own carefully controlled, never allowing herself to form the kinds of bonds that made loss devastating. Yet somehow, without intending it, she had built another kind of squadron at Westridge, students and colleagues who had seen her true capabilities and responded not with fear but with admiration. Zoe Martinez with her quiet determination, Chen with his moral courage, even the basketball team adopting the library as their headquarters. They had formed around her leadership instinctively, recognizing what Roberts had tried desperately to diminish. The library underwent a metamorphosis in the weeks following the hostage incident. Contractors replaced the broken window with bulletproof glass, a security upgrade ordered by the board without consulting Roberts. New technology arrived daily, but instead of replacing books, the equipment enhanced the existing collection. Interactive research stations flanked the reference section, and a state-of-the-art presentation space took shape in what had been unused storage. Eleanor observed these changes with measured satisfaction, recognizing them as the political theater they were. The board hadn't suddenly developed appreciation for library sciences. They were damage controlling, distancing themselves from Roberts' now scrutinized modernization campaign and its suspicious connections to the contractors involved in the attack. 3 weeks after Harrington's visit, Eleanor sat reviewing architectural plans for the expanded library when Zoe Martinez approached her desk, determination evident in every step. "Ms. Mercer, I need to talk to you about something important," the girl said, clutching a folder with white-knuckled intensity. "It's about the applications you helped me with." Eleanor set aside the blueprints, giving Zoe her full attention. The young woman had become a regular presence in the library, absorbing information about research methodologies and organization systems with remarkable aptitude. "I got accepted to 3 schools," Zoe continued, opening her folder to reveal admission letters, including the Air Force Academy. Eleanor's expression remained neutral, though her eyes registered momentary surprise. "Congratulations. That's extremely competitive. I never told you I applied there." Zoe fixed Eleanor with a penetrating gaze beyond her 18 years. "I never told anyone. But somehow, my application included a recommendation letter from Lieutenant Colonel Eleanor Mercer, detailing my exceptional crisis performance and leadership potential demonstrated during a high-risk security incident." The silence between them stretched as Eleanor considered her response. Finally, she removed her glasses, a gesture students had learned indicated a shift from librarian to something altogether more formidable. "You showed remarkable composure during the hostage situation. maintain situational awareness, protected, vulnerable classmates, assess tactical options. Those qualities deserve recognition. But I didn't do anything special, Zoe protested. I was terrified. Courage isn't about feeling fear, Eleanor replied, echoing words once spoken to her by her first flight instructor. It's about what you do while experiencing it. Zoe hesitated, then placed a second document on the desk, Official Air Force Academy admission materials. I need to decide by Friday. My parents want me to take the UCLA scholarship instead. They say the military is too dangerous, especially with everything happening globally. Eleanor studied the young woman before her, recognizing the same crossroads she herself had faced 35 years earlier. What do you want? Zoe paused, searching for words. I want to matter, to do something that requires everything I have. When I saw you take down those men, it wasn't just the combat skills that impressed me. It was how completely you transformed, like you'd been holding back your whole self all those years. Eleanor's fingers found the small wings pin she now wore discreetly on her lapel. A compromise between her past and present. There are costs to service that can't be calculated in advance, she said quietly. Choices that stay with you, responsibilities that never quite leave your shoulders, like your wingman, Zoe asked tentatively. The one from the photograph in your box, James Daniels. I looked him up after the assembly. The directness of the question might have once provoked Eleanor's retreat behind professional distance. Instead, she found herself responding with unexpected candor. James followed my order into a trap because he trusted my judgment implicitly. That trust is the foundation of military command and its heaviest burden. Eleanor leaned forward slightly. UCLA offers an excellent education without those particular costs. But you don't regret it, do you? Zoe pressed. Your service, even with what happened. Eleanor considered the question with the thoroughness she applied to everything. I regret specific decisions, tactical calls that cost lives. I don't regret the commitment itself or the purpose it served. The conversation was interrupted by Vice Principal Wilson, who entered the library with uncharacteristic urgency. Eleanor, you need to see this immediately. She placed a newspaper on the desk, folded open to reveal a headline. Federal investigation expands education contractor scheme, linked to defense information gathering. The article detailed an FBI operation spanning multiple states, investigating corporations that had secured lucrative school modernization contracts while systematically accessing sensitive information from institutions with connections to military families and defense infrastructure. Westridge Academy featured prominently, with Roberts named as a person of interest in the investigation. The board's in emergency session, Wilson continued, voice lowered despite the empty library. Roberts has disappeared. His office was cleared out overnight. Computer, files, everything. The FBI served warrants this morning. Eleanor scanned the article with practiced efficiency, extracting key information while maintaining an outwardly calm demeanor. The pattern Harrington had mentioned was now public educational institutions, targeted for their proximity to military families and defense personnel. Modernization projects serving as cover for intelligence gathering operations aimed at compromising national security. There's more, Wilson added, pulling a sealed envelope from her jacket. This was delivered by courier 10 minutes ago. It's addressed to Lieutenant Colonel Mercer, Military Protocol. Official Department of Defense SEALs. Eleanor accepted the envelope, recognizing the security classifications stamped across its surface. Thank you, Audrey. I'll need privacy for this, understanding the dismissal. Wilson nodded and retreated. Zoe remained, her expression making it clear she had no intention of leaving. This involves the same people who attacked us, doesn't it? She asked as Eleanor opened the envelope and scanned its contents. Yes, Eleanor confirmed, her mind already processing the classified brief with practiced efficiency. Roberts wasn't just pushing modernization for kickbacks or career advancement. He was part of a sophisticated operation targeting military families and defense personnel through educational institutions. The document confirmed what Eleanor had suspected since the hostage incident. The attackers hadn't been after financial records for simple fraud exposure. They'd been attempting to retrieve data Roberts had been collecting for years. Student information from military families, personnel schedules, security protocols from parents with defense clearances, all harvested through seemingly innocuous school technology upgrades and parent portals. What happens now? Zoe asked, her voice steady despite the implications. Eleanor refolded the document, her decision crystallizing with tactical clarity. Now I stop pretending to be just one thing when I've always been both. She reached for her phone, dialing the secure number Harrington had provided. General, it's Mercer. I'm accepting the Academy position. With one condition, I complete the Westridge operation first. Roberts is in the wind, and he's not working alone. The Phoenix patch lay on her desk beside the Academy admission materials Zoe had brought. 2 paths to possible futures, both shaped by the same core principles of service and purpose. Zoe, Eleanor said after ending the call, I can't tell you which choice to make, but I can show you what it means to reclaim your complete self after hiding part of it away. Starting tomorrow, this library becomes operations center for identifying everyone connected to Roberts' network. Zoe straightened, unconsciously adopting something close to a military posture. What do you need me to do? First, Eleanor replied, with the faintest hint of a smile. Round up that basketball team that's been using my library as headquarters. Tell them Lieutenant Colonel Mercer is organizing a special research project, one that requires their particular combination of teamwork and strategic thinking. The young woman nodded sharply and turned toward the door, purpose evident in her stride. She paused at the threshold, looking back at the librarian, who had become so much more than a quiet presence among the stacks. Ms. Mercer, when this is over, will you still be our librarian? Eleanor considered the question, her gaze moving from the military documents to the library blueprints and back to Zoe's expectant face. I'll always be a librarian. Zoe, some missions require flight suits and fighter jets. Others require cardigans and classification systems. The objective remains the same. Protecting what matters. The transformation of Westridge Academy's library into a command center happened with remarkable efficiency. Eleanor organized her unlikely team of students with the same precision she had once deployed managing combat squadrons. The basketball team, academic decathlon champions, and computer club members formed specialized units, each assigned specific research objectives under Eleanor's strategic direction. This is not a game, she told them during their first briefing. Standing before a digital map displaying educational institutions across 3 states. What you're looking for is a pattern of technology implementations, contractor relationships, and staff changes at these schools over the past 5 years. The students approached their assignments with unprecedented focus. They cross-referenced public records, school board minutes, and local news reports, constructing a timeline of Roberts' modernization initiatives. Alongside similar projects at other institutions, Eleanor watched them work, occasionally providing guidance but primarily allowing them to develop their own methodologies, a teaching approach she had learned from her first squadron commander. Ms. Mercer called Jason Wu, the computer club president, after 3 days of intensive research. I think I found something. He displayed a complex visualization showing contract awards across 47 schools. These 5 companies appear repeatedly, always in the same sequence, but under different subsidiary names. Eleanor studied the pattern, recognizing the sophisticated compartmentalization typical of intelligence operations. Good work. Now cross-reference the implementation dates with any security incidents at nearby military installations. The correlation emerged like a constellation once you knew which stars to connect. School technology upgrades consistently preceded security breaches at nearby defense facilities. Digital systems installed to enhance student learning experiences. We're actually gathering intelligence from the children of military personnel, harvesting everything from parents' work schedules to base security protocols casually mentioned. At home. General Harrington arrived unannounced on the 4th day, observing from the library doorway as Eleanor's student team presented their findings. His expression shifted from skepticism to growing respect as the teenagers outlined a sophisticated intelligence gathering operation hidden within educational modernization initiatives. Your students have accomplished in 4 days what military intelligence hasn't managed in 6 months, Harrington remarked when the presentation concluded. Pentagon analysts have been looking for technological sophistication. Your team identified the human patterns instead. Eleanor nodded toward Zoe, who had emerged as the group's natural leader. They approached it without preconceptions. Sometimes the clearest tactical view comes from unexpected perspectives. Later that evening, after the students had departed, Harrington and Eleanor reviewed classified intelligence files in her office. FBI surveillance had tracked Roberts to a luxury apartment in Boston, registered to one of the technology company's executives. Surveillance photos showed him meeting with individuals identified as foreign intelligence operatives. He's attempting to broker a deal, Harrington explained, offering the complete data archive in exchange for extraction and new identity. Eleanor studied the surveillance images, noting details others might miss: the tension in Roberts' posture, the defensive hand positions, the frequent glances toward exits. He's frightened. Whoever he's working for has become more threatening than federal prosecution. We need that data archive, Harrington emphasized. It contains 5 years of intelligence gleaned from military families across 47 educational institutions. The potential security compromise is catastrophic. Eleanor closed the file. Her decision already made. I'll go to Boston. Roberts knows me. He'll expect the quiet librarian he intimidated, not the tactical officer I was. This isn't your mission, Colonel. Harrington's objection came automatically. Though without conviction, the FBI has a team in place. Roberts will spot federal agents immediately. He's paranoid, desperate, and has proven surprisingly adept at operational security. Eleanor's tone carried the calm authority that had once guided pilots through combat zones. I can approach without triggering his defenses. Harrington studied her for a long moment before nodding. We'll provide support and extraction if needed. But Eleanor, he added with unusual informality, this isn't Afghanistan or Tehran. You're not dropping ordnance or flying extraction. This is intelligence recovery on domestic soil. Every mission has its parameters, she replied simply. I'll adapt accordingly. The following morning, Eleanor stood before her student researchers for what might be their final briefing. She had traded her customary cardigan for a tailored blazer, still modest and professional, but allowing greater freedom of movement. Your work has identified a significant threat to national security, she told them, pride evident beneath her professional demeanor. The authorities are moving to contain it based largely on your research. Are you going after Roberts? Zoe asked directly, having developed an uncanny ability to read Eleanor's intentions. That's a matter for federal law enforcement, Eleanor answered carefully, neither confirming nor denying. Your task now is to compile everything you've discovered into a comprehensive report. Mr. Chen will supervise while I attend to administrative matters in Boston. As the students dispersed to their assigned tasks, Zoe lingered behind. Boston is where they tracked Roberts, she said quietly. You're going after him yourself. Eleanor regarded her with measured assessment. Some operations require specific personnel with particular knowledge of the target. You're going alone. Concern flashed across Zoe's face. I worked alone for 15 years in this library. Eleanor replied with unexpected gentleness. Sometimes, the most effective approach is the least expected one. Zoe straightened, her decision visibly solidifying. I submitted my acceptance to the Air Force Academy yesterday. My parents weren't happy, but they're coming around. Pride flickered in Eleanor's eyes, not for her influence on the decision, but for the young woman's clarity of purpose. It's a challenging path. So is being a librarian. Apparently, Zoe's attempted humor barely masked her concern. Just come back, okay? The library modernization project needs your supervision. I always complete my missions, Zoe. Eleanor adjusted her glasses with precision that suddenly seemed less librarian and more tactical operator preparing equipment, especially the ones that matter most. Boston greeted Eleanor with slate-gray skies and bitter wind that cut through. The pedestrians hurrying along Boylston Street. She moved with unhurried confidence. Just another professional woman navigating the financial district, the luxury apartment building where Roberts had taken refuge rose 30 stories of steel and glass. Its security system state-of-the-art, but designed primarily to keep unauthorized visitors out, not prevent residents from receiving expected guests. Eleanor approached the reception desk with the same unassuming presence she had cultivated at Westridge. "I have a delivery for Mr. Peterson in 2407, she explained, using Robert's alias while holding a document portfolio embossed with the logo of one of the technology companies implicated in their investigation. Educational materials he requested. Specifically, the security guard barely glanced at her ID badge, a perfect counterfeit created by intelligence services that identified her as a corporate representative. "I'll need to call up first." Of course, Eleanor agreed pleasantly, betraying no concern. When Roberts answered, she spoke with the same deferential tone she had always used at school. "Mr. Peterson, this is Eleanor from Educational Resources. I have the curriculum materials you requested for review." A moment of tense silence followed before Robert's voice, tighter than she remembered, responded, "Come up." As the elevator climbed, Eleanor mentally reviewed the apartment layout memorized from FBI surveillance. The tactical challenges were significant, confined space, unknown weapons, potential for hostage situation if Roberts had company. Unlike the chemistry lab hostage crisis, she would have no ceiling access, no element of surprise beyond Robert's underestimation of her capabilities. The elevator doors opened directly into the apartment's private foyer, a security feature for premium units that now served Eleanor's purposes. By preventing Roberts from assessing her approach through a standard peephole, she pressed the buzzer, standing at an angle that would force him to open the door fully to see her. When the door swung open, Eleanor Mercer smiled politely at the man who had spent months attempting to destroy her career. The same unassuming, professional smile she had offered him countless times across the conference table at Westridge Academy. Only now she understood exactly who he was, what he had done, and precisely how she would bring him to justice. Robert's expression cycled through recognition, confusion, and finally alarm as Eleanor stepped into the apartment, closing the door behind her with quiet precision. He had lost weight since fleeing Westridge, his formerly immaculate appearance now disheveled, eyes darting nervously round the luxury space. "You?" His voice cracked slightly. "They sent the librarian. Hello." "Principal Roberts," Eleanor replied calmly, placing her portfolio on a side table while scanning the apartment. Two laptops open on the dining table, 3 mobile phones arranged beside them, suitcases partially packed near the bedroom door. He was preparing to run again. "How did you find me?" Roberts backed away, maintaining distance between them. "What do you want?" Eleanor remained by the door, her posture relaxed yet balanced, ready to move in any direction if necessary. "We need to discuss your extracurricular activities, specifically the data you collected from military families at Westridge and 46 other educational institutions." Roberts laughed, a hollow sound devoid of genuine humor. "You have no idea what you're involved in. This goes so much higher than a school principal or an aging librarian playing secret agent." "Lieutenant Colonel Eleanor Mercer, United States Air Force," she corrected, removing her glasses and pocketing them with deliberate movements. "Phoenix Squadron Commander, Operation Desert Falcon. I understand exactly what I'm involved in." "Mr. Roberts." The change in her demeanor, subtle but unmistakable, registered in Robert's expression. He glanced toward the bedroom, where Eleanor had already noted a distinctive bulge under a jacket thrown across a chair, likely a handgun. "The intelligence operation you've been supporting targeted military personnel through their children," Eleanor continued, her voice taking on the crisp authority that had once guided combat pilots. "Through enemy airspace, data harvested through school systems, innocent conversations recorded through educational technology, schedules and security protocols gleaned from homework assignments and parent-teacher conferences." Robert's forehead cracked further. "You think this was my operation? I was recruited. They approached me with the modernization proposals, the funding opportunities. By the time I realized what they were really after, I was already compromised. Yet you continued facilitating their access for 5 years," Eleanor observed, taking a measured step forward. expanding their reach, targeting specific military families, pressuring faculty who asked too many questions. They promised career advancement, connections to prestigious districts. Then it became something else. Robert's eyes darted again toward the bedroom. Insurance policy. They called it evidence that would implicate me if anything went wrong. Now they want it back before they extract me. Eleanor assessed the tactical situation with practiced efficiency. Roberts was desperate, frightened, likely armed but untrained. The data archive. The mission objective was presumably on one of the devices on the table, but which one? Who are they, Roberts? She asked, maintaining conversational tone while advancing another step. Who turned a school principal into an intelligence asset targeting American military families? The sound of the apartment door's electronic lock engaging froze both of them. Someone else had accessed the system remotely. Robert's face drained of color as he lunged toward the bedroom. They're here. They'll kill us both, Eleanor moved with the explosive speed that had once made her one of the Air Force's most formidable close combat instructors. She intercepted Roberts before he could reach the weapon, redirecting his momentum into a controlled takedown that left him breathless on the floor, arms secured in a joint lock that prevented movement without causing permanent damage. The archive. She demanded, increasing pressure just enough to focus his attention. Which device? Blue laptop. He gasped, encrypted. Password is Westridge 2407. Eleanor secured Roberts with tactical restraints from her blazer pocket. Equipment. Harrington had insisted she carry, and moved swiftly to the table, accessing the laptop while maintaining awareness of the door. The encryption yielded to the password, revealing thousands of files meticulously organized by school district, military installation, and security classification. The door's electronic lock disengaged again. Eleanor positioned herself strategically, using the apartment's layout for tactical advantage as the door swung open, to reveal to men in business attire, their body language and situational awareness immediately identifying them as trained operatives, rather than actual businessmen. What happened next occurred with such fluid precision that Roberts, watching from the floor, would later tell FBI interrogators it seemed choreographed. Eleanor engaged both men simultaneously, using the confined entry space to neutralize their numerical advantage. Her movements displayed decades of combat training refined to instinctive response, redirecting force, exploiting vulnerabilities, and systematically disarming both threats without employing lethal force. 73 seconds after they entered, both men lay unconscious, secured with their own restraints. Eleanor hadn't even disturbed her blazer. Federal agents are securing the building perimeter, she informed Roberts calmly, returning to the laptop to initiate the secure file transfer protocol Harrington had established. They'll be here in approximately 4 minutes. I suggest you use that time to consider how cooperative you intend to be during your debriefing. 3 weeks later, Eleanor Mercer stood before a packed auditorium at Westridge Academy. The library expansion project was well underway, its funding secure after Roberts' network had been exposed, and the legitimate modernization separated from the intelligence operation that had hidden within it. Today marks my final day as your librarian, she announced to the assembled students and faculty. Murmurs rippled through the crowd despite the fact that her departure had been rumored for days. I've accepted a position at the Air Force Academy, where I'll be helping to shape the next generation of officers. Disappointment showed on many faces, particularly among her research team, who had received special commendations from the Department of Defense for their contributions to national security. Commendations that would remain classified for years, but would significantly enhance their college applications. Before I leave, I want to share something I've learned. During my 15 years at Westridge, Eleanor surveyed the faces before her. Students who had once passed her in hallways without a second glance now hanging on her every word. We often define ourselves and others by a single role or identity: principal, teacher, student, librarian. But humans are fundamentally composite beings, shaped by every experience, every skill we develop, every challenge we overcome. She removed her glasses, a gesture that had become symbolic of her dual identity. When we reduce ourselves or others to a single dimension, we diminish the full spectrum of human potential. The quiet librarian can be a combat pilot. The struggling student can be a brilliant analyst. The path that seems most unlikely often leads to our greatest contributions. Eleanor's gaze found Zoe in the front row, the young woman's academy acceptance letter now framed in her parents' living room. The most valuable intelligence isn't found in classified archives or secure databases. It's found in recognizing the extraordinary capabilities hidden within ordinary appearances. The standing ovation that followed would have once made Eleanor deeply uncomfortable. Now she accepted it with the same grace she had once shown receiving military honors, acknowledging the recognition while maintaining the quiet dignity that had always characterized her presence. As the assembly concluded, students lined up to say goodbye, many bringing books for her to sign, a gesture that blended her librarian and military identities in ways that felt unexpectedly right. Chen presented her with a leather-bound first edition of Profiles in Courage, inscribed by the entire faculty. "The Air Force Academy doesn't know how lucky they are," he said, emotion making his voice unsteady. "You've taught us all that heroism doesn't always look like what we expect." Eleanor's new office at the academy would include a display case for her military decorations, photographs of Phoenix Squadron, and the commendation her student research team had earned. But it would also feature her Westridge Academy credentials, carefully preserved book repair tools, and the handwritten notes students had left her over 15 years, most discovered only after her true identity became known. As she packed the last items from her library desk, Eleanor found Zoe waiting by the door in a crisp new blazer that hinted at the cadet uniform she would soon wear. "I've been thinking about what you said," Zoe began, helping Eleanor carry boxes to her car. "About being composite beings, not defined by a single role," and Eleanor prompted, recognizing the thoughtful expression that typically preceded Zoe's most insightful observations. "Your two careers weren't actually that different," Zoe concluded. "Fighter pilots navigate complex situations using specialized knowledge to protect others. Librarians guide people through information landscapes, helping them find what they need to succeed. Both require precision, discipline, and understanding human behavior." Eleanor smiled, a genuine expression that had once been rare but now came more naturally. "An astute tactical assessment, Cadet Martinez." As she drove away from Westridge Academy for the final time, Eleanor reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought her full circle, from military service to educational stewardship and back again. The road ahead would integrate both parts of her identity, allowing her to guide future officers with the wisdom of someone who had learned that true strength often comes disguised as quietness, and that sometimes the most powerful weapon is simply refusing to be diminished by others' limited perceptions. The rosewood box sat on the passenger seat beside her, no longer locked away but open to the possibilities ahead. Inside, her Phoenix Squadron patch lay atop her Westridge Academy ID badge, two symbols of service that had finally found harmony. What would you do if you discovered that someone you overlooked or underestimated harbored extraordinary capabilities? How might you recognize the hidden depths in those around you, or even in yourself? Perhaps the true measure of character lies not in the roles we play, but in how completely we bring our whole selves to whatever mission we undertake. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more extraordinary true stories about seemingly ordinary people who prove to be anything but. Hit that notification bell to be alerted when we post new content, and leave a comment telling us about someone in your life whose hidden talent surprised you. Remember, the most remarkable people often hide in plain sight, just waiting for the right moment to soar.